I know a lot of people are talking about Project 2025, which is very, very important, and I hit on it. But because Agenda 47 is the agenda that Donald Trump has not distanced himself from, I wanted to lean into that as well so that I would really see if it was much different than Project 2025. What I have found is Agenda 47 is his agenda for his presidency, what his platform is, what he wants to accomplish, and that kind of thing. Project 2025 is the how-to manual. How do we set things up so that you can do, so that it will support your agenda, right? It deals with it directly and also some ideological things that we have termed the far right conservative agenda, right? Or extremist conservative ideology. And you know, a lot of times in elections, people use a whole lot of different terms to describe the other, both disparaging. But I also, when vetting my candidates, look at something that Kamala Harris so eloquently said. She said, if you want to know where a politician, if you want to know what's important to a politician, look at what they fight for, right? And so looking at this agenda, as well as Donald Trump's appearances, what he has said while on the air, what the people that support him, the underwriters of Project 2025, which if you were to put Agenda 47 and Project 2025 side by side and look at the topic areas, you see how they align with one another. And even more importantly, you're able to look back in history from 2015, when Donald Trump first came on the stage talking more vocally about politics as opposed to business. But when he started really focusing on politics, if you follow what he has said, the people who have rallied behind him, those that he has elected into significant places of influence and power, you see a certain theme. You see their ideology become front and center. You see the platform he stands on, that he does not waver on, right? You see that. You see the engine that fuels his campaign and the things that he says he's going to do. You see where he lands. What does he put the most energy into, no matter what question he's asked? What does he always go back to? That tells you a lot about where he actually lands and the approach that's going to inform his Agenda 47, right? That's why I think this discussion about LGBTQIA plus is very significant. It's very significant. One of the things I found while looking through Agenda 47, which you can actually download, it's a PDF, 16 pages. From looking at this, there are certain keywords that you see in this document, as well as Project 2025, and also other conservatives, especially MAGA, which means Make America Great Again, those Trump supporters who we call MAGA, they all use some of the same buzzwords. And instead of using LGBTQIA, you hear them use words like trans and woke and extreme left wing and extreme liberal. And under that umbrella, Black people, brown people, LGBTQIA people, anybody who subscribes to anything other than certain traditional conservative values. And I say that to the extreme because there are Republicans who are distancing themselves from the MAGA agenda who call themselves conservative. So there's certain conservative ideologies that they share, but they agree that former President Trump's is extreme. So extreme as to warrant that they vote for a different political party, like Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, people who would never vote for a Democrat, but consider the MAGA extremist agenda and approach to governing so dangerous that they refuse to vote for Trump. So when people start leaving their political party or start voting for someone they said they'd never vote for, then one cannot dismiss that. One cannot dismiss that. I know you may like Trump and find him charismatic and that kind of thing, but when those kinds of things happen, to me, I've learned that you have to take a step back and say, wait a minute, what is it that they know that I don't? Why is everybody defecting on this person? What's going on? Right? You're talking about conservatives who are normally into deregulation. They don't like a lot of rules over corporations. They tend to lean toward capitalism. They tend to have certain conservative family values. They want prayer in schools. They believe in the family. You know, they have certain views that are conservative. And if you know what their views are and they are defecting, then you know something is wrong that really needs you to lean in. So let's look at LGBTQIA+ and what Agenda 47 is and what the underlying beliefs are, what the approach is to this, and why it's worth noting. Significantly, apart from Black and brown, but to look at this as a group represented in our citizenship, that we need to look at how the MAGA approach to governing would specifically impact this demographic. And one word of caution that I want to say to you, whether you're Black, you're brown, you're Latino, whatever, whether you're gay, you're straight, you're trans, and you have been on the Republican side of things and you have voted Republican and you may like some of the vibrata of Trump, you like the way he moves, you find that kind of engaging, charming, you like some of the things he says, you like that he's anti-establishment, you like those things. I want you to consider the fact, however, if you have not read Agenda 47 and have not looked further into Project 2025, you owe yourself to do so. Because the people that he's appointing into these places of power and influence, even if he says he's distanced himself from it, they have not. That is their agenda. They came together to put this agenda together. that already certain things have taken place politically, socially, in the education system that line up with Project 2025. Okay? So you might like those aspects of him, but you don't want to vote against what's in your best interest. You can like him, but you have to understand you would have to be subject to his governance for the next 4+ years. And I say 4+ because it is very, very clear in his support of Russia and his support of Putin that he would prefer the dictatorship model rather than the democratic model. And if that is what he favors, and Agenda 47 and Project 2025 are in alignment with that because of the people that he's putting in these strategic places, you might be stuck in a situation that you did not really want and end up trapped and unable to roll it back. So I invite you and I implore you to really think about if who you're voting for is in your best interest, and if you have a family that looks like a lot of our families now, where you've got interracial marriage, you've got some people who are gay, some people who are straight, some people who are transitioning. I mean, our families nowadays are a microcosm of America. And so when you're looking at your voting, you can't just look at yourself. You have to look at how it's going to impact those that you love. Okay? So, okay, let's look at LGBTQIA. Now, Agenda 47 does not have a section. It's sprinkled throughout. So I'm going to try to catch it, and I invite you to look at it. If you see some places where it comes up that maybe I might not have seen, then feel free to put it in the comment section and we can talk about it. Okay? Let's see, under chapter 7, cultivate great K through 12 schools leading to great jobs and great lives for young people. Under that section of Agenda 47, number 6 underneath that says, knowledge and skills, not CRT and gender indoctrination. CRT stands for critical race theory. Gender indoctrination stands for gay, vernacular, transgender, queer, all the alphabets represented in LGBTQIA. What each letter stands for is represented under the umbrella of gender indoctrination, okay? It says, Republicans will ensure children are taught fundamentals like reading, history, science, and math, not left-wing propaganda. We will defund schools that engage in inappropriate political indoctrination of our children using federal taxpayer dollars. Now, when you look at that, you might say, okay, this reading, history, science, math sounds good. But what is considered left-wing propaganda? What is considered inappropriate political indoctrination? What is considered that? Now, I urge you to deep dive. Don't assume you know. but look at what the MAGA agenda believes these terms to mean. Okay? I'm not asking you to look at what Democrats are saying. I'm asking you, if you're leaning toward Trump, to look at how they define these terms and ask yourself, are they talking to me? Are you one of these? Are you one of the letters LGBTQIA plus? If you fall under that, you have to say, are they talking to me? Because listen, you might go to rallies and sis boom ba, but out in these streets, you're still going to be treated the same way I am. And if you're married to someone Black, understand, they're going to be treated Black. They're going to be treated black, brown. They're going to be treated LGBTQIA. They're going to be treated that way. So you have to ask yourself, when you look at their definitions, are they talking to me? Okay? So when they're talking about left-wing propaganda, what is that? What is that? When they're talking about inappropriate political indoctrination, what is that? And I'm going to fill in some of those blanks as we go, but just so that you can start thinking, okay? So he mentions gender indoctrination there. So then you have to keep looking down because, like I said, it's sprinkled in here, okay? Let's see what else we have here. Chapter 9, government of, by, and for the people, okay? What it says here, Republicans will stop woke and weaponized government. What is that? Well, I already said in my previous episodes, which I encourage you to listen to, the woke originated in the Black community. So you have to ask yourself, will I be affected by this? Okay. All right. So it says, we will hold accountable those who have misused the power of government to unjustly prosecute their political opponents. We will declassify government records, root out wrongdoers, and fire corrupt employees. Okay. Again, you have to understand what these things mean under the MAGA agenda. Okay. But more pointedly, this is what I just said is kind of implied. But let's get to something more pointed, shall we? Under the same chapter 9, it says Republicans will end left-wing gender insanity. Okay? It says we will keep men out of women's sports, ban taxpayer funding for sex change surgeries, and stop taxpayer-funded schools from promoting gender transition, reverse Biden's radical rewrite of Title IX education regulations, and restore protections for women and girls. Okay? And like I said, we're going to dive more deeply into how that will be accomplished. Who falls under that umbrella? What was Title IX education, and what was Biden's rewrite? Or did Biden even rewrite it? Let's look into that. Okay, we'll look into that. So that's another specific thing, dealing mostly with the trans community. Okay, but let's look at Title IX because it may cover more than the trans community, okay? Let's see here. Now, this is kind of implied too, okay? It says modernize the military. This is under chapter 10, return to peace through strength. And just in case you don't know it, the MAGA agenda implies that trans people and gay people and women are not strong. Okay? I want you to think about that. Okay? Now, so when I look at modernize the military and I read, Republicans will ensure our military is the most modern, lethal, and powerful force in the world. We will invest in cutting edge research and advanced technologies, including an Iron Dome missile defense shield, support our troops with higher pay, and this part, and get woke left-wing Democrats fired as soon as possible. So even that is telling you that the MAGA agenda is extreme. When the only thing you want in your military is what does not fall under woke left wing. Okay? So we're going to deep dive into what's considered woke left wing. And you're going to ask yourself, are they talking to me? Right? Because while we may differ in policies, we do not differ in the right of Americans who want to serve and help to defend this country access to do so. But this is already saying, no, I only want a select group. I want a select group. Okay? All right, so that talks about that. Let's see if I see anything else. Okay, that's all that I saw in Agenda 47. So I did bring up some of my Google searches. I have them in the background, and I will put the links into the description part of my YouTube video. So I encourage you to do a deeper dive, to read what I am providing to you, and to do your own research. And I always say, when you're reading this, ask yourself, are they talking to me? Are they talking to my wife? Are they talking to my husband? Are they talking to my children? Are they talking to anybody who is not a MAGA Republican? Right? Right? Are they talking to anybody that I love that we may disagree on policy, but we don't disagree on our rights to vote how we vote, believe how we believe, love who we love, our rights and freedoms? We don't differ on that because that's the hallmark of democracy. Our vote being counted, the will of the people being respected, using our voice through our vote, being able to peacefully protest. Is it implied here that anybody who peacefully protests what's going on under a certain party's administration should be considered as an enemy and treated as such? You have to ask yourself these things. And sadly, there are a lot of people who are voting for Trump who have not done their homework. They like the policy things that they've heard, but they don't understand how he's going to go about it. Are you going to be disenfranchised ultimately? Are you going to have to pay higher taxes ultimately? Is the middle class going to have to carry the load for how he's going to go about his agenda ultimately? Are our children going to suffer ultimately? Because again, when you leave your house, when you're black or brown, wife or husband or child, mixed race child, leaves the house, how is the system that Donald Trump is building, how will they be regarded in that system? Are they, will you be voting against their interest? You got to ask yourself that. And I know that the Democratic umbrella has usually been more inclusive. It's been more, you can worship the way you want to worship, you can do what you want to do, right? If you want to have prayer, you can pray, right? You can pray to your God. You can be a devout in your faith. You can have a traditional family where the husband works and the wife stays home with kids. You can have that. Nobody's going to bother you. You can have that. Under Kamala Harris, you can have that. But under Donald Trump, it's saying only certain people who ascribe to a certain belief system can have that. The rest of you cannot. And you will be defunded, you will be prosecuted, you will be cut off, cut out, unless you subscribe to this. Now, is that America? No, it is not. Is that dictatorship? Yes, it is. And unless you want America to operate like Russia does, if you want us to have our own garden variety Putin here in America, then you're going to have to take a step back. You can like Donald Trump, but you don't have to vote for him just because you like him. You have to vote what's in the interest of this country, where everybody doesn't look like you, everybody doesn't think like you. And you have said as a country, hey, you can come, we welcome, we're a country of immigrants, but then want to vilify the immigrants for not being Christian, for not being white, for not having a quote traditional family. You want to penalize and punish the very people that you have welcomed into this space. So, yes, it does matter. I encourage you, do your research, and ask yourself, does this apply to me? When I walk out this door, does this apply to me? When this election is over, will I have shot myself in the foot? You need to ask yourself that, okay? All right, so now let's look. I want to look at left wing, far left wing, extreme left wing, woke. What is considered far left ideology? And this caught my attention on Reddit, Reddit. Someone posted this question and different people weighed in. The question was, what is far left ideology? Okay. And there were a lot of responses. And this one really, really nailed it. It said, The right wing's beliefs can be boiled down to hierarchies. That includes who deserves power and who doesn't. Their actions prove this out. Everything else is justification for these actions, and those justifications do not require honesty. They don't require, and I'm adding to it, they don't require accountability. There is this belief, this central belief that boils down to hierarchies. So, what are some hierarchies that have been in the news where MAGA is concerned? First, make America great again. Well, when was America great? Well, let's think about it. It kind of reminds you of that song. I don't know if y'all are old enough to, well, if you're in your 60s, you do remember it. Archie Bunker, their theme song. Edith says, and you knew who you were then. Girls were girls and men were men, right? So that hierarchy is that day where white people were at the top of the food chain. White males were at the top of the food chain and everybody else was below them. The white male patriarchy agenda was what ruled everything. That was the hierarchy. And the established hierarchy was the man was the head, the women were supposed to serve their man, and her value was the kitchen and the bedroom, right? That was the beliefs back then. She did not have the right to vote. She could not buy property. Anything that she got had to come through her husband. The husband decided how the children were going to be raised, how they were going to be disciplined, what they were going to believe. That hierarchy decided what needed to go into history books, what needed to be taught. That hierarchy decided what role others, like women, brown, Black people, that hierarchy decided what role you would play, and your role had to serve that person, that belief system, that collective. Your value is based on how well you served that particular mindset, system, agenda, ideology. Everything served it. And back in that day, men were king. They could come home, put their feet up, and everything revolved around them. Even so much and so in domestic violence situations. What a man did with his wife and to his wife was considered between them. Anybody else ain't none of your business. Corporal punishment. How you choose to discipline your children was your business. Where you worship, even what you were taught. That Bible, the Bible that they condoned was the rule book. Any religious practices that you had apart from it were considered pagan, wrong, heathen. It had to line up to this Bible, and you had to see this Bible through my ideology. So if it says slaves obey your masters, they said, see, even God says you should obey me. I want you all to understand it. We decide where you're going to live. We decide. This is our part. You live wherever you can find a place outside of this, which was usually not a very good place to live. We're going to make sure me, myself, and mine are going to have the best. And the most you can ever hope is to work for me. I've established the way corporations operate and what your role is. If you don't own it, you got to work for it. We decide what your children learn in school. No, your history don't have to have nothing to do with it. If the first history we want you to ever know is that you were a slave, then we're going to put that in the books when you get into 8th grade. That's what happened to me. I knew nothing about slavery. I knew I was Black. I knew my skin color was different. I knew that there were white schools and Black schools, and that I was going to a school that had desegregated from the 4th grade. But knowing that my ancestors were slaves, I didn't know that. And it changed me. Finding that out was shocking. It was a culture shock like nothing I had ever experienced in my life. And so that construct decided what part of my place in the American story got told. It determined that no, we couldn't come to your house. We couldn't cross your threshold. We couldn't worship with you. No, you can't be a part of the police. No, all these systems built to support America do not have you in mind. I want you to understand. That's for some when America was great. There wasn't any interracial marriage. As a matter of fact, it was outlawed. Black people and white people did not wait for the doctor in the same waiting room. There was a coloreds only place. And while it may not be that, the way this reads, that's anti-democratic, it has the same thing. Unless you are a MAGA Republican and you believe in this agenda and you believe like we do ideologically, then you are othered. You don't have a right. You don't have a slice. You don't have a piece of the pie. We're making it so you don't have a voice at all. I want you to understand, it may not merely be Black and white. Now it's political party, Democrat, Republican. The far right, the far left. If you're not MAGA, if you don't follow or support the MAGA agenda, then you will have no place. Things are already being put in place so that there's certain Senate and House officials and officials in education, officials in the penal system, certain political appointees are already being put in place and being trained, even when it comes to voting certification. Different people are being put in places of influence and strategic places so that it pushes the ideology of one sector of people against another whole swath of people. So anything that doesn't align with it is considered woke. Any people that don't fall under this umbrella are considered DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. That includes all the downline. The only race that or person that it does not include is an old white man. An old white man or a white man head of household or the white male patriarchy. Top of food chain. DEI is everything underneath. You need to understand what you're voting for. So do you want to go back to that? Do you want to go back to doctors not being able to give you the kind of care that you need reproductively? We women usually have a primary care and an OBGYN for a reason. We have someone that specializes in our reproductive health because it is unique. But yet the MAGA agenda is even trying to dictate how our doctors respond to our reproductive health. Do you see how women and brown and black and immigrants and gays and trans are all being othered? So when you read Agenda 47 and Project 2025, you have to ask yourself, are they talking to me? Will this affect me? Will this affect those that I love in a negative way? Will this roll back their freedoms and their rights to be treated humanely with dignity and regard? Will this hinder them from being able to pursue happiness? Life, liberty, and pursue happiness. Is this going to allow one group of people to benefit at the expense of the other group of people in this land called America and in this democratic society? Is it? Then you have to ask yourself, then I can't vote for that. Then can't. Oh, wow. Left wing is more about equality and equity, right? And it looks at equity for everybody, right? Where we all citizens have access to what we need to have to thrive. Now, if you're a white evangelical that says that you believe in Christianity, then that's right in alignment with the teachings of Jesus. So what's the problem? If you believe in Christianity, then don't you yourself become anti-Christian by thinking that the wealthy should get wealthier at the expense of everybody in that downline. And maybe nobody's broken it down to you like this, but this is the truth. And I will say this, I tend to be more moderate, which is a conversation that I had with someone in the comment section under one of my episodes. I tend to be more moderate. I'm not for war. I am not for when it comes to the establishment of certain things. You would consider me as being anti-establishment, because if the establishment is white nationalism, and if what was established as was that white men are at the top of the food chain and the rest of us are below them, then I'm anti that. I'm not for that. I'm more for equity. Don't call me a citizen and then block me from having access to this American dream, right? And deregulation. Now, I don't believe that corporations and companies should just run business all willy-nilly, doing it whatever way they do it, in a way that makes it harder on the rest of the citizens. I don't believe that corporations should be so money hungry that they're polluting our world, eroding our ozone layer, making the planet too toxic, and cancer and other diseases on the rise. There needs to be some checks and balances. I believe that labor, you shouldn't expect people to just work like we're at sweatshops and not give them fair pay and raises and time off. So I don't believe corporations should just benefit and not provide what is humane and fair in valuing its workers. Right? So while I do believe that people have a right to partake in capitalism, I don't believe it should be wound up and just set out there without any kind of accountability and boundaries, because that affects the economy too. That affects the healthcare system too. So there needs to be some balance here. So for people that say, I just want to just plan on deregulate everything, then baby, I'm glad you're not making the rules, because then there'll be no stop signs and no stop lights. Everybody could just drive whatever way they want to drive. And whoever has the biggest car can just mow down anybody else on the highway. That's basically what's being said. No, there needs to be balance. We need to be responsible in how we go about it. So yes, there do need to be some rules. Yes. So, but I'm moderate. I believe that both parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, when they collaborate and work together and share their ideas and passionately go at it, that they both can come up with a product that is balanced and good for this nation. So I think it takes both. I do. I think it's healthy when there's a healthy discourse with both. But if it's going over to extreme, then nobody's benefiting. If it's so extreme that it ties the hands of Congress to do the job it is supposed to do, then it is extreme. And if you look at all of this through the lens that they look at trans as being the very low, they look at that as being unnatural, heathen, anti-Christian, anti-whatever, and want to shut trans people out and force an ideology on them that does not fit, then there's something wrong. And you can't put the genie back in the bottle. There's going to continue to be trans people. There's going to continue to be gay people. There's going to continue to be queer people. There's going to continue to be drag queens. It's going to continue. You can't stop it. It's going to continue. So you have to, as a society, take that into consideration. Right? So I said all that to say, okay, I've defined that part. So now let's look at what PolitiFact has to say about this whole checking LGBTQ plus talking points as recently as the 2024 Republican National Convention. Let's look at that. Let's look at what was said. This was written by Grace Abels. This is dated July 24th, 2024. She writes, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I invite you to do so. She says, professional wrestler Hulk Hogan might have captured tons of attention at the Republican National Convention for ripping his shirt off and screaming to let Trumpomania run wild. Excuse me, but references to queer and trans issues also ran wild throughout the 4-day event. Leave it to the fact checkers to tell you this, but some of the LGBTQ plus related statements spoken from the Milwaukee stage needed more context. For example, Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene said this about, quote, the establishment in Washington. This is what she said. They promised normalcy and gave us Transgender Visibility Day on Easter Sunday. That's misleading. The Transgender Day of Visibility, celebrating trans representation, falls on March 31st every year. Easter Sunday moves annually and is determined by the moon. In 2024, they happen to fall on the same day. Biden recognized both days in public statements, prompting claims that Easter had been, quote unquote, replaced. Excuse me. Richard Grenell, or is it Grenell? Whatever way you want to pronounce it, Grenell, former acting National Intelligence Director and the first openly gay cabinet member, had a more pro-LGBTQ plus message in his speech. Quote, Donald Trump doesn't care if you're gay or straight, black, brown or white, or what gender you are. He knows that we are all Americans and that it's time to put America first, which is something similar to what Amber Rose said. Okay? But this is in PolitiFact. PolitiFact's review of the convention speeches found that most references to LGBTQ plus issues were echoes of familiar talking points about LGBTQ plus indoctrination in schools and the military and concerns around transgender athletes. When I was reading Agenda 47, I told you I was going to bring more context to it, and this is it. Notably absent were claims about gender-affirming medical care for trans youth that have been the subject of numerous statewide bans in Republican-led states. Again, like I said, voting for Trump, are you voting against your own self-interest or the interests of people that you love? I will continue. The Biden administration has recently tempered its support of gender-affirming care for youth, saying it opposes surgical procedures for minors, which are rare. Looking back at our previous coverage, here are some facts and context around the major LGBTQ plus talking points at the 2024 Republican National Convention. Okay? And I'm going to put a kick stop there for just a moment because I want to bring up Title IX, because part of what I read to you in Agenda 47 was talking about what Biden had done to redefine Title IX. So I just brought that up and we'll talk about that. Okay, LGBTQ plus ideology, I said that quotes, end quote, in schools. On the convention's first night, Senator Ron Johnson described the Democrats' quote unquote fringe agenda as including the quote sexualization and indoctrination of our children, end quote. This theme continued across all 4 nights as several speakers raised concerns that LGBTQ plus content in schools harms kids. Quote, Democrats come for your kids, end quote. Former Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro said on July 17th. Quote, they're indoctrinating them with poisonous attitudes on race and gender, end quote. This is what PolitiFact says. We have seen this theme of Democratic, quote, indoctrination. Remember, I read gender indoctrination, dominate Republican talking points in recent years, including from Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis, who during his July 16th RNC address again raised alarms. He cited diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, also known as DEI, that broadly aim to increase institutional diversity, including in gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, age, culture, class, and religion. This is what he says. Democrats want to impose gender ideology on everyone from our infantrymen, remember I said indirectly the military, to kindergartners, end quote, DeSantis said. Quote, they stand for DEI, which really means division, exclusion, and indoctrination, and it's wrong, end quote. That is what Ron DeSantis said, the same one that said, basically, keep gay out of your mouth. And signed into law that you cannot use the word gay. Okay? There's more, and it's very, very interesting, and I encourage you to read it. But I want to also look at that Title IX that they're accusing Biden of redefining. So let's look at what we're looking at now. Okay, what they're talking about is Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972 now includes gender identity as a protected category. That's what they're saying. Now, that was what AI brought up. But let's look at what the U.S. Department of Education has to say. Under resources for LGBTQI plus students, the mission of the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, OCR, is to ensure, excuse me, equal access to education and to promote educational excellence through vigorous enforcement of civil rights in our nation's schools. To serve this mission, OCR enforces civil rights laws to protect all students from unlawful discrimination and harassment based on race, color, national origin, sex, disability, and age. And they're saying that sex now includes sexual orientation because it says this includes students who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, asexual, intersex, non-binary, or identify their sexual orientation or gender identity in other ways, which all is under the umbrella of LGBTQI, and I want to add A, because A for asexual, plus bullying, excuse me, harassment, exclusion from school activities, and other forms of discrimination can interfere with LGBTQIA plus students' access to a safe and inclusive school environment. Federal law, however, requires schools to ensure that LGBTQIA students and other students have equal access to all aspects of a school's programs and activities, which goes back to when they say not to have men in women's sports. That sounds like, well, that's why they're men and women's sports. But what they're dog whistling or alluding to is trans people who were once women, once men that have transitioned into being women, right? And somebody once asked me when I was doing these Agenda 47 episodes, would you like your daughter to be in the ring with Mike Tyson? And my response was, no, I wouldn't want my son either. Mike Tyson is a different person, right? And I do believe that there are certain things that one has to take into consideration. But to completely say that trans people cannot participate in the sports of their transgender, I think that's overreaching. Sure, there needs to be some things that are common sense, yeah. But they wouldn't even put a lightweight in the ring with Mike Tyson. Come on. That's why you got heavyweight, lightweight. You have different boxing categories, right? And who knows, there might be transgender. See, we don't know, but that's a conversation to be had. Okay? And it goes into filing a complaint with OCR and that kind of thing. So I wanted to talk about that because it is directly mentioned in Agenda 47. I also pulled up 538. And there was an article under state legislatures where it talks about over 100 anti-LGBTQ plus laws have passed in the last 5 years, half of them this year. And the reason being is there are more Republican-led agencies, places of authority and influence in our public square. Some are state laws, state legislatures. But it definitely, remember when I said, looking at Project 2025 shows you the how-to handbook on how Trump can promote his agenda and follow through on his agenda. Remember I said that? This is what I was referring to. That there have been certain decisions made strategically, whether it's rezoning efforts, whether it's stacking the courts with more conservative Republican judges, whether that's having more school superintendents, Republican-led, all these different representations are part of the ground game to lay the groundwork for this Agenda 47. Even rolling back Roe v. Wade and the response of states accordingly. That gave states the right to say, okay, well, we're banning abortion. And some states, well, we're banning contraceptives. And some states, well, we're banning IVF. That's why in some states, women are miscarrying in the parking lot because they have to be close to death before the doctor will do anything to save them. And so no matter what Trump is trying to do to roll it back and now include IVF, it doesn't change the fact that you let the genie out of the bottle. And I feel like we need a president who can predict or has the ability to predict the consequences of his or her actions. And clearly, he was so set on rolling back Roe v. Wade, he did not see what the consequences would be. But those that wrote Project 2025 did. And while they're applauding and happy about it, now he's caught in a firestorm, a pushback. So let's look at this. Let's look at this closer. It starts out by saying, by the time students go back to school this fall in North Dakota, 2 new bills will be in effect, restricting some transgender athletes from playing on school sports teams. Governor Doug Burgum signed these bills into law last month. Yet, just 2 years ago, when a similar ban passed the North Dakota Legislative Assembly, Burgum vetoed the bill. He noted at the time that the state had no record of any trans girls competing in girls' sports and that the state had a, quote, a level playing field and fairness in girls' sports, end quote. This is still true. He made the same comments when signing the bills last month. So what changed? The state legislature had finally built the momentum and support needed to send these bills to Burgum's desk with a veto-proof majority, the result of a multi-year effort by state Republicans to get these bills signed into law. So this is happening, the rolling back of affirmative rights, the rolling back of DEI, where corporations and schools are no longer trying to have equity in the education system or in corporate America. This didn't just start. This was the intention all along. And certain decisions have been made and people put into place and a ground game such that it would bring the results, excuse me, that we have now. Trump said that he was going to get Roe v. Wade overturned. He said so. And he's done it. So when you think, he ain't going to do that. Oh, you know, he talks a lot, but he ain't going to do that. Oh, you know, Trump loves black people. Oh, you know, Trump, he don't have no problem with gays and trans people. Are you shooting yourself in the foot? Because the people underwriting his presidency sure do. And he's got to answer to those folks over you. I want you to understand, these rich billionaires that are helping him to get elected, they're all part and parcel with the people that helped to write Project 2025. Okay? I want you to understand. Okay, and it continues. It's a familiar trend for those who track legislation that restricts LGBTQ plus rights. Over the last 5 years, the number of anti-LGBTQ plus bills, both introduced and passed into law at the state level, has exploded. According to a 538 analysis of data provided by the American Civil Liberties Union and the Trevor Project, a suicide prevention organization for LGBTQ plus youth. Unsurprisingly, these bills are almost exclusively introduced and supported by Republican lawmakers, and the data reveals that they aren't coming up with new restrictions at random. Instead, these bills tend to follow cyclical patterns with certain types of restrictions, such as school sports bans for trans athletes, prohibitions on gender affirming care for minors, and bathroom bills, gradually increasing in popularity for a year or two, then peaking with a huge wave of legislation in multiple states. Once laws have been passed, lawmakers move on and a new trend emerges. Okay, according to Kat Smith, the manager of state legislative strategy and rapid response for the Trevor Project, these cycles often include a few years of trial and error in which bills are proposed and die before eventually passing after the momentum and support has built, like in North Dakota. So this was the intention for a long time. They were just waiting for the right time. And the reason we're seeing these things roll back is because everything is aligning to support it. Okay, so I wanted to talk about that. And lastly, because I know this is getting a little longer than what I had intended, but hey, it's all good. And for those of you who really, really want to hear it, this is not going to be too long for you. You need to know all of what I'm saying. GLAAD, GLAAD.org, has a fact sheet, Donald Trump on LGBTQ issues specific to education. Okay. GLAAD has documented the anti-LGBTQ history of Donald Trump, including his policies and promises to overhaul the United States educational system. The full anti-LGBTQ record is available on GLAAD's Trump Accountability Tracker. Bullying and anti-LGBTQ policies in education are among the motivators for LGBTQ voters. I'm going to have the link to Trump Accountability Tracker in the description. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to give you a couple of things. Trump's education record includes ending Obama-era protections, allowing transgender students in public schools to choose bathrooms that align with their gender identity. Another point, making frequent inflammatory remarks about public schools that push, quote, critical race theory, transgender insanity, and other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content on our children, end quote. Speaking out about his Agenda 47 plan, Trump said, quote, no serious country should be telling its children that they were born with the wrong gender, a concept that was never heard of in all of human history. Nobody's ever heard of this. What's happening today? It was all when the radical left invented it just a few years ago. Now, the truth of the matter is, children are not being proselyted by the transgender community. Or should I say proselytized? I think that's the word. They're not. But these same children play with other little children whose parents might be gay. You all are acting like teachers are doing this. Again, this is the world we live in. Whether you say take gay out of your mouth or not, just as children are going to play with children of interracial couples, they're going to play with children that are being raised by single parents and divorced parents. They're going to be raised by children who were adopted by same-sex mothers or same-sex fathers. Yes. And unless you're going to screen every single household that children come out of that's not democratic, that goes against the freedoms and rights that we all expect in this country, unless you're going target them, then our children are all going to go to school together. You have to understand the consequences of your actions and the consequences of what you're saying. Right? Forming the 1776 Commission to whitewash history in rebuke of teaching about systemic racism, critical race theory, and deeper examinations of how slavery has affected American society. That's what critical race theory seeks to do. So, who's whitewashing history? Is not slavery a part of American history? Black people didn't start it. White people did. White ancestors did. The founders of this country started it. So they got to deal with it. It's not whitewashing. It's the truth. And what I agree that you don't want to tell your 2-year-old, your 3-year-old, your 4-year-old there are age-appropriate ways of introducing the truth about American history where you have the good and the bad, which is part of living. Even growth, there's some good and some bad in it. What helps us to be compassionate is understanding that there's some good in the worst of us and some bad in the best of us. But love heals and love forgives and love forms a pathway for redemption. Right? So there is a way to talk about American history, which includes Black history. There is a way to talk about it that is full of grace and forgiveness. But you're not going to gain anything by leaving it completely out and trying to teach everybody under this American educational system an incomplete and inaccurate history. So there is a middle ground, but the MAGA want it completely removed and want to brainwash everybody below that line to believe what this top echelon wants you to believe, wants to present it the way they want to present it. And that erases out people's voice, their culture, their existence. Isn't that what happened when slaves were brought over to this country? It's the same thing. It's the same rule book. Different emphases, but it's the same game. We've seen this before. Okay? So now, Title IX, I did talk about that, but it also listed here in the fact sheet. Selecting Betsy DeVos as the Secretary of Education, DeVos' anti-LGBTQ record includes banning transgender bathroom access. Remember when she was on the news talking about all that? Rolling back Obama administration era Title IX guidelines, right? And on a personal level, providing financial support to anti-LGBTQ organizations. DeVos's father, Edgar Prince, is one of the founders of the Anti-LGBTQ Family Research Council. It even goes into Trump's Supreme Court nominees also have a record of anti-LGBTQ rulings. So I want you to read all that. Okay, and I've done a lot of talking here because this is the very end of my Agenda 47. So I was kind of bringing it all together. It does matter the approach and the context. It matters what your candidate has fought for. It does matter if what they're going to do is going to shoot you in the foot. It does matter how it's going to affect your family and those that you claim to love. It matters. Who you vote for matters. Because you may end up suffering because of who you voted for. And then you'll be going, wait a minute. Trump said he was going to do this. He said he was going to do that. And he did it, but you were not able to predict the consequences of what he said he was going to do. We already know from his first term as president that trickle-down economics did not work. Giving tax breaks to the wealthy did not trickle down to our pocketbooks. It did not. And I've already refuted the fact that he did not give more to HBCUs than the Harris-Biden administration. All he did was use it as a marketing thing to sign checks that the Democrats fought for. They fought for it and pushed it through. And he agreed to it as long as they could print out checks and he could sign them. So he could take credit for something he did not do. Wake up, America. I'm saying it to the ball players, to the athletes, to the millionaire Black people. One day your children are going to want to go to Duke. They're going to want to go to Harvard. They're going to want to go to these schools. And if they got an ounce of Black in them, understand they fall underneath. If you don't believe it, put on a pair of sunglasses and drive your car in certain neighborhoods and see if you're not stopped and frisked. If you don't believe it, drive down certain neighborhoods where they don't know who you are. I want you to wake up and look around you. Okay? Again, I welcome your comments. I don't mind if you disagree with me, but I do ask you to bring some receipts. This whole thing of just a one-liner, that's trolling. And I will delete those. But if you want to have an honest conversation where we talk as adults, no lowballing, no condescent, nothing like that, but where we're able to have a talk where maybe we might disagree without being disagreeable. If you're willing to have that kind of conversation, I welcome that. But if you start lowballing just because I push back and saying stuff like, well, I thought you were smart. Oh, obviously you haven't read your, if you start that kind of thing, I would delete all of it. Because we're not going to be mean toward each other. We're not going to be mean-spirited. We're not going to be noisy. We're not going to act up. We're not going to incite a you versus me. I'm not going to fall for it. We're not going to talk about, I thought you were intelligent. Oh, you people are not intelligent anyway. Any of that kind of stuff, I don't care whether it comes from whatever your color is. Bigotry is bigotry, regardless of what your skin color is. Sexism and misogyny is sexism and misogyny, regardless of what your gender is and your race. And I will not tolerate it. But if you have a difference and you want to put down the reasons, and we have an intelligent conversation about it, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. And I will treat you with kindness, and I ask you to do the same with me, because at the end of the day, regardless to who is in the White House, we're going to still have to live on this earth together. And I do not want to be walking out of my door afraid to go certain places because of feeling like I'm going to be treated like my foreparents were treated in the 60s. I don't want my freedoms and rights rolled back. I don't want them rolled back. And I don't want us to go back to a time of contention and Jim Crow. So I will stand stalwart on the reasons why I do not believe Trump is fit for office. And I will give you my reasons. And we can look at some of his own words, what he said. We can have that conversation. Because whether you like Kamala Harris or not, I do not believe she is without a person that cannot be reasoned with. I believe she is intelligent. She's smart. I believe she will surround herself, like she said, she will have a Republican in her cabinet. That shows a lot about wanting to reach across the aisle and build consensus. She's someone who is for the people. She has fought for the people throughout her public life. She has done so. That is in a consistent with her record. Donald Trump has not fought for the people. He's fought for himself and his rich friends and dictators who he emulates, he wishes to emulate and admires. So before you come at me, I'm going to be like, where is the lie? Where is the lie in what I'm saying? Whether you don't like her or not, I believe she is going to fight for our rights and freedoms. I believe it. She has a vested interest being a Black and Asian woman. She has a vested interest in a way that Donald Trump never will. So on that alone, there are other things that support it, but on that alone, oh yeah. Oh yeah. So yeah, that's it. I'm sure I have gone over time, but you know what? This is my last video on Agenda 47, talking about that and I don't know, I might talk about Project 2025, but that's a 900 plus page document. Now, you may say, well, no, it's not. It's 800 pages, or it's 933 pages, or it's 900 pages. Well, there are different versions of it circulating. There are. That's why I put a link to the original version in my description. So when I cite a page, you can go find it, right? So I may do that the closer it gets to election. I don't know. I'm planning on volunteering and helping in the effort to get Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, get them elected. I also encourage those of you who are listening to this who are favoring them. I encourage you to be just as interested in your local and state elections. And if judges are on the ballot, to educate yourself, to vote for those who will support the Harris Walz agenda, because that's the only way, well, not the only way, but that is the least hectic way of pushing through her agenda promises on economics and on the other promises of what she intends to do, what her agenda is. If she has a supportive Democratic cabinet, legislature supporting her, she'll be able to do it with more ease and more grace and less pushback. I feel like that's necessary right now. And so I'm voting blue down ballot. Now, you may live in a state where there are Republicans that do favor, they favor soon to be President Harris's agenda, though they are still Republicans. That's between you, your conscience, but we definitely want to provide her with enough support. So let's take back the House, let's take back the Senate. In your local and state legislatures, put Democrats, people voting blue, people who align with your values, vote to put them in office. Vote to put them in office.